The world is burning, a city reduced to ash and ruin. Amidst the chaos, a lone figure lights a match. A survivor, scorched and broken, takes a heavy step forward. He glares at the one responsible for the destruction. The burnt man raises a knife, vowing to make him pay. The gunslinger seems to commend his bravery, telling him to deliver a message to the demons. A message delivered with a rather sharp point. He is to tell them that Sutton sent him. A man named Sutton, a rider in a desolate land. A deed, his official discharge papers. The quest is simple. Retire to a quiet life. He rides toward his new home in the frontier. But a hostile welcome awaits him from the shadows. A crossbow bolt is let loose and finds its mark right in Sutton's chest. The shooter emerges, ordering him to halt. Guess this town's hospitality could use some work. The bolt, however, simply burns away into nothing. Sutton raises his hands, feigning innocence. He introduces himself as John Sutton, here on a writ from the eternal flame itself. The man seems to accept his story, pointing him in the right direction for Fairford. Sutton tips his hat to the local sheriff, George. A handshake seals their brief, tense introduction. The sheriff watches him go, hoping their paths don't cross. Sutton rides into Fairford, a town that looks suspiciously quiet. A massive stone statue looms over the town square, a statue that seems to be watching his every move. The locals watch on with clear disapproval. As Sutton makes his way through the main street, even the children stare with a sense of unease. He finally reaches the town's land office. Inside, an official inspects his writ, noting the fresh hole in it. But the seal of the eternal flame is unmistakable. Sutton casually mentions his run-in with a tough crowd. Apparently, getting shot at is just part of the local charm. The man introduces himself as Jonas Halden, but Sutton's mind is on the statue he saw earlier. Jonas explains the statue is of his late father, a fellow veteran of the Mage Wars, he presumes. He seems genuinely concerned for Sutton's safety, offering to find him a home in a less eventful village. But Sutton is confident in his own abilities. Resigned, Jonas agrees to show him to his new property. As they ride, Sutton asks about the story behind Jonas's father. He was a scout who survived the Battle of Torrens Plains, a feat Sutton finds impossible. Jonas recounts the tale of a water mage and his father's clever escape. But the story ends grimly. His father was the first to die here of mysterious causes. Sutton remarks that Jonas's father was lucky to get out alive. He's just hoping his new property is a quiet one. But as they arrive, they see a tense standoff already in progress. Jonas seems to have conveniently forgotten to mention this part. A group of men are trying to intimidate a woman and her family. Jonas immediately rushes to her aid, calling out her name. The woman Ellie stands her ground, protecting 2 children. The lead thug gets uncomfortably close, mocking her fear. But her expression isn't fear. It's pure disgust. The men grab her as Jonas shouts helplessly from a distance. The thug scoffs at Jonas's title, calling it inherited. But a new voice cuts through the tension, claiming this land as his own. The thug dismisses the claim, saying they're just handling some business. Sutton gives them a 2-second warning before they become lawn ornaments. He then turns to Ellie, asking if she's in trouble. She nervously denies it, clearly intimidated. Sutton strolls past, inviting them to continue their conversation. The thugs are left utterly bewildered by his words, but Sutton's attention has already shifted to a more pressing matter. He'd like to know where his cows are. The young boy suddenly shouts that these men are thieves. His sister quickly covers his mouth, her eyes wide with fear. But it's too late. Sutton has heard everything. He looms over the group, demanding to know what was said. Ellie tries to play it off, insisting it was nothing. The lead thug smirks, dismissing the boy's words as lies. But Sutton gets closer, confirming he heard it all quite clearly. He seems very, very particular about his livestock. The thug's defiance is met with a sudden, crushing grip, and a lesson in what happens when you steal from John Sutton. The thug is slammed hard against the side of the house. Sutton gets close, delivering a simple, direct order. He has exactly 3 days to return the cows. And just as abruptly, we return to the aftermath of the confrontation. The dust settles around the quiet farmhouse at dusk. Inside, Sutton calls out to Ellie as she stands in the doorway with her son. The young boy, Ben, worries they'll be forced to leave. His mother gently tries to soothe his fears. She promises him that everything will be fine. But Ben is unconvinced, recalling that Sutton is a soldier. Back inside, Sutton calls out to Ellie while reading. She answers, her voice filled with apprehension. He asks how she ended up here since squatters weren't in the brochure. She explains that the original owner passed away, and that Jonas let them stay after their town was destroyed by the Leperian army, a detail that seems to catch Sutton completely by surprise. Sutton stares into the flickering candlelight. The flame reflects in his eyes, stirring a memory. A memory of fire, chaos, and a lone soldier. and of a young woman hiding in the ruins, her face etched with the terror of that day. Back in the present, the weight of the past hangs in the air. He snuffs out the candle, and the memory with it. Pushing himself away from the table, he needs a moment. He walks away, trying to escape the sudden tension. Turning back, he offers to leave them in peace. He offers to find them a new place to stay, but Ellie refuses, insisting that she and her son will be the ones to leave. She's ready to walk out the door right then and there. Sutton suggests they at least stay the night to think things over. She reluctantly agrees to his offer. A short while later, a warm meal is simmering on the stove. Sutton seems to be handling the cooking himself. Guess retired soldier comes with a few unexpected skills. He invites them to come in and eat. Nothing like a hot stew to ease the tension. Ben's gratitude is immediate and heartfelt. While they eat, Sutton loses himself in a book. The meal is a quiet affair, at least for the adults. The boy is full of praise for the chef. He credits his culinary talent to his reading material. A book on how to farm? The boy is baffled that he bought a farm with no skills. Sutton figures it can't be harder than being a soldier. The boy runs off, curious about his past life. He answers grimly, then asks how she learned to read. The boy explains that Ellie taught him to read, who in turn learned from her own grandmother. Sutton closes his book, musing that everyone has their secrets. As he clears the table, he admits he misses the smell of a good book. Apparently they're in short supply these days. At least his dishwashing skills are impeccable. With the evening winding down, he decides to turn in for the night. A quiet darkness settles over the farmhouse. But for Sutton, sleep doesn't come easily. And in the other room, Ellie lies awake with her own troubled thoughts. Sutton lies awake, mulling over the strangers in his house. In the other room, Ellie is just as suspicious. He wonders if they could be thieves or even spies. She remembers his writ, bearing the Eternal Flame's seal, and their mutual paranoia reaches the same dark conclusion. Unable to rest, she slips out of bed to investigate. Of course, her son chooses this exact moment to fall off the bed. The sudden noise puts Sutton on high alert. He makes his way down the creaking hallway. Hearing his footsteps, Ellie assumes the worst. They meet in the darkened hallway, candles in hand. The flame on her candle suddenly flares to life. She jumps back, demanding to know why he's still awake. Sutton calmly explains he heard a noise and was concerned. A tense silence hangs between them, thick with suspicion. She quickly dismisses his concern, blaming herself for the noise. Back in her room, sleep still eludes her. And in the other room, Sutton is just as restless. His mind is plagued by a terrible nightmare, a vision of his past self, surrounded by fire and death. He jolts awake, gasping for air. And a strange message appears, announcing, the apocalypse is one step closer. The next morning, Ellie is already up and in the kitchen. She quietly prepares a simple breakfast. But she adds a little something extra to the plate, her eyes glowing with a strange green light. As the food itself begins to radiate a sickly energy, her attempt at cooking seems to go terribly wrong, leaving her weak and coughing from the effort. Just as Sutton walks in, completely unaware of her little science experiment, he finds her in the kitchen already preparing a meal. Ben rushes in, drawn by the smell of breakfast. Ellie nervously explains it's nothing special. Sutton notes her pale complexion, offering to help, but she waves it off as a recurring illness. He even offers his own food, but she refuses. Instead, she serves him a plate of what she salvaged. Sutton looks down at the simple meal, his expression unreadable. But his eyes tell a different story, one of deep suspicion. Ellie watches him, barely daring to breathe. Sutton takes a bite of the questionable breakfast. The three of them eat, the air thick with unspoken tension. Ellie offers to show him around the property to break the silence. Sutton agrees with a surprisingly friendly smile. He finishes every last bite of the potentially tainted meal. With breakfast done, he grabs his hat, ready for the tour. They head out across the yard toward the large barn. Ellie presents the first stop on their grand tour. She admits the place needs a little work, pointing out the hole in the roof. But Sutton's mind is already back on his missing livestock. Ellie confirms this is where the cows were kept before they were stolen. She adds that the thugs also ransacked their garden twice. Sutton asks about the bull, which was kept in a separate pasture. The tour continues past a dilapidated fence, a symbol of the farm's decay. She gestures sadly toward a barren patch of dirt that was once a garden. It was a small plot, but it was all they could manage on their own. The lingering poison from the Mage Wars has made the land difficult to farm. He asks when the pastures were last tended to, learning it's been 3 years. She sighs, admitting they couldn't find anyone willing to plow the fields. Looking up at him, she asks him to take good care of the place. She promises they'll be out of his hair by noon. With that, she and Ben turn to leave the property for good. Sutton watches them go, his expression unreadable. He lets out a weary sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. But just as they're about to walk away, he calls out for them to wait. They turn back, completely bewildered by his change of heart. He calmly states that they're going to need a new plow. Ellie tries to clarify, but he's clearly not talking about himself. He admits he's new to farming and offers them a deal to stay and help. Ellie is left speechless, needing a moment to process the sudden offer. The boy is thrilled, already promising to do his chores. His mother, however, looks on with deep concern. She agrees to stay, but only on one condition. He must protect them from the Wolf King and his bandits. Sutton accepts the terms without a moment's hesitation. And with a handshake, their new arrangement is official. He suggests they all head into town for that new plow, but the very idea is met with sudden visible fear. Ben blurts out the real reason: gruesome murders in town. Sutton takes a moment to process this charming new detail. The boy explains the townspeople think it's the work of a witch. He adds that they're not very welcoming, and suspect Ellie herself. His mother quickly covers his mouth, dismissing the claim. Sutton listens intently, the pieces starting to click into place. He decides the plow can wait, opting to gather more food instead. The family is overjoyed by his decision to stay, and with their new arrangement settled for the moment, Sutton heads out alone into the quiet woods. He can feel it in the air. The mana here is much stronger, and a familiar fiery power begins to awaken within him. Orbs of pure fire begin to manifest around him. He draws the energy in, his body crackling with power. The familiar heat sizzles along his skin, a welcome sensation, and a dark crimson light throbs within his eyes. He notes how pure the mana is here, perfect for a recharge. It's a far cry from the corrupted energy of the wastes. With his power restored, he gets to work. His target, an unsuspecting deer enjoying a quiet meal. But Sutton's approach is anything but quiet. Guess his idea of hunting is a little more flashy. He greets his prey with a fiery, enthusiastic welcome. A single searing touch is all it takes to end the chase. And just like that, the hunt is over. A status window confirms he's a level 99 mage on a quest to retire. Soon the smell of cooking drifts from the barn. Sutton gets to work preparing their hard-won meal. Ben runs out, completely amazed at his hunting prowess. Sutton simply says he's had a lot of practice over the years. But the boy has a more serious question, asking if he's dangerous. His answer is a silent, sharp demonstration of his skill. The knife lands dead center on a makeshift target. Ben is amazed, asking if Sutton is a class holder. Sutton explains that with practice, he could become a rogue. The boy, brimming with excitement, asks to try it himself. Sutton hands over the blade but warns him to be careful. Ben eagerly agrees, ready to make his first throw. But his attempt ends with the sound of shattering glass. The boy is horrified by his immediate failure. Sutton just adds a new window to their shopping list. He then steps outside, offering to help Ellie with her work. He explains that he's been doing his homework. Ellie is surprised to see him back from hunting so early. He confirms the deer is already prepped and in the smokehouse. Sutton insists the deed doesn't matter. This is still her home. His unexpected kindness leaves her at a loss for words. She playfully asks if he learned to be a soldier from a book too. He admits he's only just reached the chapter on gardening, so she decides it's time for a more hands-on approach. She hands him a trowel and some seeds, telling him to get planting. Sutton panics, clarifying he hasn't actually finished the chapter yet. He laughs nervously, admitting he may have bitten off more than he can chew. Ellie playfully asks how he ever planned to manage this place on his own. He mentions her love for books, offering to share his collection. Her eyes light up at the prospect of new reading material. As they work under the setting sun, she notes he's unlike any soldier she's met. He replies grimly that it's a good thing he's not a soldier anymore. She teases him, asking if this much hard labor is really his idea of retirement. Sutton admits he just wasn't expecting it to be so repetitive. She offers to make a list of supplies they need for the farm. Their first project, she decides, will be fixing up the barn. Ellie diligently jots down their list of needs for the farm. Sutton casually adds a new window to the shopping list. She looks up, completely baffled by the strange request. He simply points to Ben, who's still practicing his throws in the distance. Realization dawns, and she adds it to the list without another word. But as she writes, Sutton notices a prominent burn scar on her arm. He asks what happened, but her face immediately darkens. She quickly hands him the list, avoiding the question entirely. Sutton takes it, promising to get started on the wood tomorrow. And as a new day dawns over the mountains, Sutton gets to work on gathering wood, wondering if this is how normal people do it. He takes a swing with the axe, putting his back into it, but the result is underwhelming, to say the least. He decides that some things are just better when you don't use tools. The tree comes crashing down in a fiery instant. So much for subtlety. He then lifts the entire trunk onto his shoulder without breaking a sweat. and strolls back to the farm, greeting the stunned onlookers. Ellie and Ben can only stare in utter disbelief at his feat of strength. He chalks it up to drinking milk, then puts himself in charge of barn repairs. Ben is ecstatic, now convinced he's a class holder too. Watching them, Sutton thinks maybe this quiet life has a purpose after all. He figures he can make a small difference here before he has to leave. And so, the three of them get to work, restoring the farm together. Sutton handles the heavy repairs on the barn, while Ellie and Ben tackle the overgrown fields with renewed hope. After a long day, even a level 99 mage needs a break. They burst in, excited to share their progress, only to find him asleep. He's startled awake, quickly apologizing for dozing off on the job. But Ellie is simply in awe of his handiwork on the barn. He checks the list, insisting he's not done yet. But Ellie thinks the new stalls are already perfect. Sutton looks at her, completely baffled by the question. He reminds her of the one thing they're still missing: the cows. A quest window appears, a stark reminder of his current mission. He recalls the deadline he gave the thugs is almost up. The boy suddenly feels an intense heat radiating from Sutton. Sutton just blames it on the summer sun, ever the cool customer. He tells Ben to get his sister. It's time to head into town. And so, the new family rides toward Fairford. Sutton tells the others he's heading to the blacksmith. Ellie points him in the right direction. He soon arrives at the local smithy. Inside, he meets the blacksmith, a woman named Garrett. She already knows who he is, welcoming him to Fairford. She mentions the recent troubles, and Sutton cuts right to the chase. His blunt question seems to catch her off guard. But Sutton is unfazed, asking how bad it could really be. Garrett leans in, explaining the rumors of a witch. He reads a notice about the murders, completely unafraid of magic. Garrett warns him that Fairford isn't a great place to settle down. She's already heard about his clash with the Wolf King's gang. Apparently, the town was quiet until some adventurers showed up. Sutton scoffs, calling them mercenaries looking to loot. Getting back to business, she says the plow will take a week. Sutton then presents a shopping list that could build a small fortress. Meanwhile, Ellie and Ben are being run out of a local shop. A woman throws something at them, accusing them of having blood money. Sutton rides up, demanding to know what's happening. But Ben can't hold it in, shouting that they think Ellie is the witch. Sutton considers the accusation, a plan already forming. He leads them right back into the shop they were just thrown out of, and calmly asks the woman if there seems to be a problem. She doubles down, refusing to serve a witch or her companions. Sutton scoffs, placing his seal on the counter and asking for the manager. The woman's face drains of color as she recognizes the symbol. He asks if the seal of a royal knight is known to lie. The actual shopkeeper appears, thrilled to meet a knight in his store. But Sutton isn't here for pleasantries. He demands an apology for Ellie. The man quickly backpedals, blaming the town's paranoia for their behavior. He declares that she's under the protection of the eternal flame. He tells them to ignore his history and just fill the order. And just like that, they leave with a wagon full of supplies. Ellie thanks him for his help, but tells him not to do it again. She knows exactly what a royal knight is, a witch hunter. Sutton nervously clarifies that he's retired now. She asks if Jonas sent him here to dispose of her. He admits he just wanted to build something for a change, revealing he left the eternal flame as soon as he could. She breaks the tension, insisting they can handle themselves. Sutton tells Ellie he has one more place to check out. She looks back, refusing to promise they'll stay out of trouble. He walks toward the town saloon, thinking things went about as expected. He figures it's a decent place to stay while he looks for a new home. He compliments the inn, and the bartender credits Sheriff George for its safety. Sutton recognizes the name, learning it's the same George Wells he met earlier. He hopes to run into the sheriff again, but his thought is cut short. A group of loud adventurers suddenly burst through the doors. Their leader asks Sutton for directions, but he's new here too. The man tries to insist, but Sutton makes it clear he's not interested in helping. The adventurers leave, muttering about the town's rude welcome. The bartender recognizes the group with a sigh. The sheriff is impressed, noting Sutton handled them with ease. They're apparently searching for a mythical mage tower, but Sutton changes the subject, reporting his stolen livestock. He's more interested in a home address than a court date, so the sheriff gives him an off-the-books tip, warning him about the Wolf King, a tamer class holder. While they avoid the town, his farm is now a target. The sheriff then leaves to keep an eye on the adventurers. With the sheriff gone, the saloon doors swing shut. Sutton asks about the Wolf King, learning the rumors are true. But a sudden shout from outside cuts their conversation short. Ellie is shielding Ben as a mob pelts them with stones. Sutton's eyes glow with a cold, simmering rage. The townsfolk are convinced she's the witch they're hunting. Guess she didn't promise to stay out of trouble after all. Her warning shot zips past the heads of two young boys. She warns Sutton to stay back, fearing he'll make it worse. but the mob's leader vows to cleanse all magic from the world. Sutton's eyes widen in disbelief at the scene. But before he can act, a crossbow bolt finds its mark in the crowd. He rushes forward, shielding Ellie and her son from the chaos. The mob's leader accuses him of defending a murderous witch, but Sutton flips the script, telling the man he's the one in the wrong. He grabs the zealot, reminding him the war on magic is over, and gives him a rather forceful lesson in hydration. He holds the man under, telling the rest of the mob to scatter. The children flee in terror, leaving their leader to his fate. They can't believe what they're seeing, especially since their leader was a class holder. The zealot emerges from the barrel, sputtering with rage. He leaps forward with his sword, vowing to make Sutton pay. But Sutton easily parries the blow, pushing Ellie to safety. The zealot insists his cause is righteous, his eyes burning with conviction. But Ellie sees right through him, telling him she's not fooled. She declares he'll be the last death this town ever sees. Before she can act, Sutton steps in with a fiery grip. The man screams in agony, realizing he's been cursed. Sutton tells him to be quiet with a rather forceful suggestion. And the zealot goes down for the count, hitting the dirt hard. The zealot struggles to his feet, still spitting curses. He hurls a rock, calling on the eternal flame to cleanse them, but Sutton snatches it out of the air with ease. He crushes the stone to dust, his eyes glowing with cold fury, and delivers a final, chilling warning to the terrified man. He tells him to leave while he still can. But first, a quick lesson on the fragility of the human skull. The zealot's conviction finally breaks, replaced by pleas for mercy, a request that Sutton seems to ignore completely. He pins the man to the ground, calmly agreeing to his terms. He delivers a final warning to the terrified onlookers. A lesson about throwing stones from glass houses. But a woman rushes in, demanding he release her husband. Sutton looks up, realizing this is the zealot's wife. He notes what a lovely fellow she married, endangering kids and all. She accuses Sutton of nearly killing him. Sutton calmly points out that a real witch would have. He describes the gruesome curses a true mage could unleash. He tells her to be grateful that Ellie is not who they think she is. And with a final warning, he leads his new family away. Back at the saloon, the dust begins to settle. Inside, Sutton tends to Ellie's wounds, regretting this trip to town. She explains that the rumors have only gotten worse. Sutton looks at her, asking for the details. She's now being blamed for a death from years ago. Ellie quickly quiets her brother's angry outburst. But Sutton cuts to the heart of the matter, asking about the zealot's interest. She confirms it's true, wondering why he isn't worried. He dismisses the rumors, noting she doesn't have enough mana to be a witch. She seems relieved, as he explains his skills are from the war, not magic. She's surprised he knows anything besides destruction. Sutton tells them he's leaving tomorrow to get his cows back. He hands Ellie a knife, offering to teach her how to use it. Ben asks for one too, but Sutton has seen his handiwork. The boy gets a hammer instead. A subtle lesson in personal responsibility. And as a new day dawns over Fairford, Sutton wakes up ready to settle a score. He passes on breakfast, stating that the thug's time is up. Ellie voices her concern, but he promises a swift return. Sutton tips his hat and walks out of the yard. Ellie watches him go, worried he's underestimating his enemy. Ben agrees, questioning his sister about Sutton's intelligence. Inside the barn, Sutton prepares for his journey. He decides against taking a horse, figuring running will be faster. He may not be a farmer, but he knows how to handle a few chickens. And with a burst of speed, he's off through the woods. Leaping up a sheer cliff face with impossible agility, he makes a grand entrance, asking for a man named Whale. The guards are stunned, demanding to know who this stranger is. He calmly announces he's here for Whale and that he's expected. The guards dismiss his claim, warning him about their absent leader. One of the men approaches with a spear, but Sutton seems unconcerned. The camera pans out, revealing a fortified bandit encampment. He takes a seat, casually confirming he's an old acquaintance of Whale's. The guard continues his threats, noting that most people who come here end up as wolf food, just like their cattle. Just then, Whale himself appears, wondering what the commotion is about. His confusion turns to pure shock as he recognizes the visitor. Sutton greets him with a friendly smile, reminding him it's been 3 long days. He calmly notes that Whale must be busy, since his cows are still missing. Whale bursts out laughing, mocking Sutton's confidence. But his smile fades as he realizes Sutton is dead serious. With a snap of his fingers, he calls for backup. He then accuses Sutton of trying to steal from the Wolf King himself. Sutton seems unimpressed, asking this group of swell fellows about the murders in town. Whale quickly denies knowing anything about it. Just then, a much larger figure steps forward, demanding to know who Sutton is. The Wolf King himself appears, surprised Sutton actually came. He offers Sutton a choice: crawl down the mountain or get kicked down. Sutton ignores the threat, asking if the Wolf King knows about his cows. The large man swings down, vowing to stop him right there. But Sutton's counter is faster, a fiery blow to the gut. The giant collapses, leaving Sutton to walk past unimpressed. Another bandit rushes in, swinging a heavy axe. An attack that's stopped with a single, firm grip. And with a quick twist, the fight is over. He turns to the others, asking who wants to be next. Two more step forward, but he easily catches their spears and turns their own weapons against them in a blur of motion. Whale can only stare in horror as another man goes down. He turns and flees, begging for a mercy Sutton doesn't have. But Sutton catches him, offering to assist with his departure, and sends him on a one-way trip down the mountain. He feigns surprise as the rest of the bandits charge in. One of the men manages to get him in a headlock, a hold that doesn't last long as Sutton's power flares to life. He breaks the hold with a single blow, clearly unimpressed. Suddenly, a much larger figure slams him to the ground. Sutton looks up, finally recognizing a true class holder. The giant roars, entering what Sutton calls a barbarian's mountain mode. But Sutton isn't worried, claiming he can reinforce his own body too. He imbues a simple pipe with his own fiery energy, ready to see whose bones are really stronger. The two forces collide, shattering the ground beneath them. Sutton follows up with a swift strike to the man's back. A solid blow connects with the back of his head, and the giant goes down. His mountain mode not quite enough. Sutton turns his attention back to the stunned Wolf King, who suddenly seems to be regretting all of his life choices. The Wolf King's bravado completely evaporates as Sutton leans in to talk about those cows. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Ben eyes an uneaten breakfast. Ellie wonders if they've made a terrible mistake, a concern that seems lost on her younger brother. She questions their trust in a former royal knight, but Ben figures he's probably dead by now anyway. He seems to think retired just means very, very tired. Their debate is cut short by a sudden knock at the door, and Ellie opens it to find Jonas standing on their doorstep. He tries to sweet-talk his way inside to discuss the situation, but Ellie is having none of it, refusing his offer of shelter. Jonas warns her that Sutton is dangerous, but she accuses him of orchestrating this. He insists his position as leader will protect her from the rumors. She tells him to lead himself right back out the door. Ellie loses her patience while Ben offers some unhelpful moral support. Jonas is left stunned by the boy's brutal honesty. He sighs, trying to explain the gravity of the situation. He tells her that soldiers don't just retire after a war, unless they enjoyed the fighting a little too much. Ellie retorts that if he's a killer, he's in good company. She warns him that Sutton will be furious about his stolen eggs. Jonas just wipes his mouth, sarcastically offering his condolences. Fed up, she tells him to get out of her house, and smashes the plate on the floor to make her point. Jonas finally relents, agreeing to leave, but not before reminding her that he can make the rumors go away. He urges her to reconsider as the door slams in his face. Alone again, Ellie considers his words about Sutton. She can't imagine anyone enjoying killing, especially after the horrors of the war that destroyed her home. A younger Ellie scavenges for food amidst the rubble. She finds a single apple, a small moment of hope, but her relief is shattered by a sudden, cruel attack. A soldier of the Eternal Flame approaches her with a menacing grin, a zealot who answers only to her fanatical leaders. Ellie demands to know what more they could possibly want from them. The soldier explains her mission, to leave no mage standing. Ellie pleads for her life, insisting they are just civilians, an act of self-defense that would haunt her for years to come. The memory ends with a desperate, bloody swing. Her eyes are wide with the terror of what she's done, but another soldier takes aim from the ruins above, and a bolt is let loose with deadly intent. Back in the present, she mulls over Sutton's title. Convinced that all royal knights are just bloodthirsty killers, her thoughts are interrupted by a sound from outside, where Sutton is having a very heartfelt reunion with his cows. He quickly composes himself, trying to look cool. He explains that Whale was very cooperative about the whole thing. He asks about Jonas, revealing he gave him a firm warning. Just then, Ben rushes in with the harness, eager to help. Sutton fits it onto the cow, asking how to connect it to the plow. Ellie explains they'll need a chain, which Sutton adds to his list. With that settled, he asks for a lesson in a more delicate skill. The lesson begins, with Ellie correcting his clumsy technique, but she suddenly notices fresh burn marks on his hands. He quickly dismisses her concern, blaming his own clumsiness. She doesn't seem convinced, asking about his own past. She then reveals a chilling detail about her own history. She explains that after the initial destruction, the Royal Knights arrived to eliminate any survivors. She and Ben were the only ones to escape the purge. Sutton is horrified to learn his former order targeted civilians. Ellie's eyes burn with a cold, hard resolve. She draws a knife, vowing to one day reach the Eternal Flame himself, and with glowing eyes, she promises to end him. Talk about having lofty goals. Just then, a quest window confirms his retirement is complete, pushing back the apocalypse. He gains a skill point, which is useless for a max-level mage whose only quest is to grow wheat. He wonders what the mysterious doom points even mean, and curses the game's designer, questioning why he's the only one who can see the system. His new quest is to grow wheat, which is not exactly what he signed up for, and his mind flashes back 15 years to a life he still doesn't understand. A younger Sutton named John is out camping with his brothers, who are doing their best to remind him he's not an outdoorsman, but their teasing is cut short when they spot his hidden game console. He's tackled to the ground for breaking his no-games promise. Annoyed, he walks away from the brotherly bonding session, deciding that family time is perhaps a little overrated. But as he puts his game away, a strange light fills the tent, and his world is suddenly replaced by the chaos of a battlefield. He watches in horror as a man is impaled by a shard of ice. His brother rushes to his side, pointing to the ice-wielding attacker. The dying man explains they've been summoned to fight for Le Pierre. John tries to help, but the man reveals he was summoned years ago. With his last breath, he hands John a mysterious scroll. John panics, asking if there's any way to escape this nightmare. The only escape, the Ice Mage coldly declares, is death. He dismisses the death as a game and demands the scroll. John unrolls it, furious that this is what they're dying for, and a new power awakens, teaching him a basic fireball spell. Talk about a crash course. John warns the Ice Mage to stay back, his hands now crackling with fire. He stares at his palms, completely bewildered by this sudden power. The mage offers to mentor him, dismissing the man he just killed as a game character. He tells John that killing is just a chore in this world, and offers him a partnership. With no other choice, John reluctantly accepts the twisted deal. Their handshake seals the pact, a dark energy swirling around them. But the mage's glowing eye reveals his true, treacherous intent. And he's met with a sudden, fiery rebuttal from John's hand. As the mage burns away, John levels up, trying to rationalize the kill. Back in the present, Sutton mulls over Ellie's vow, his thoughts cut short by a knock. Ellie's voice cuts through his thoughts, asking to open a window, but his mind is still trapped in the past, in the burning ruins of her home. He remembers seeing her there, a lone survivor amidst the chaos. Snapping back to the present, he quickly agrees to her request. He plays it off as a deep meditation to restore his mana. Sure, let's go with that. Ellie reminds him they need to pick up the plow in town. As they ride, he keeps his secret, asking about other locals in the valley. But Ben chimes in, mentioning the local Grimm and specters. Sutton's interest is immediately piqued by the local folklore, and the boy gives a terrifyingly detailed account of the monsters. Sutton's mind is clearly elsewhere as Garrett welcomes them to town. She proudly presents his brand new plow, along with the other supplies. But Sutton cuts her off, explaining they have other business to attend to, leaving Ben to wait outside the general store, looking thrilled about it. Inside, they gather groceries under the hateful glares of the locals. Ellie notes their terrified expressions, but Sutton clarifies the dynamic. She thanks him for his assistance, but warns him not to make a habit of it. On the way home, Sutton announces his plan to plant wheat. He's confident it will survive the winter because his book says so. Guess that settles it. Back at the farm, Ben proudly presents the bull, ready for duty. Sutton decides to name his new bovine companion Ferdy. As Ben runs off to help his sister, Sutton shares a moment with the bull. He recalls how he used mana to lure the cows down the mountain, and decides to try a similar trick, offering Ferdy a mana stone. The bull eagerly accepts the magical treat. With Ferdy now supercharged, Sutton prepares to plow the field. Ellie can only watch in shock as they take off like a rocket. The duo tears through the entire field in a matter of seconds. She rushes out, completely bewildered by the commotion. Sutton proudly presents the finished product, a perfectly plowed field. But Ellie is quick to point out his handiwork is a little crooked. She sighs, figuring this is how she'll earn her keep around here. Sutton feigns offense, asking if his work was unsatisfactory. She confirms with a deadpan stare that it very much was. So she takes the lead, ready to show him how it's really done. As they work, she learns he's never even seen a bull plow before. With the fields finally done, their work moves to the barn. Sutton seems to be getting the hang of milking the cows, but he's a little too good, leaving them with an excess of milk. A problem made worse since no one in town will buy from a supposed witch. Ellie suggests they could make cheese or butter, but worries it'll spoil. She admits she never pictured him as the farming type. Sutton asks what kind of type he seems to be. The kind who would hate retirement and never wanted to be a soldier. He admits he didn't have a choice, finding this life harder than war. She asks why, and he explains that war was at least predictable. He was just alive, terrified of what the next day would bring. But now he gets to build things. A thought cut short by Ben's arrival. The boy shouts that Sheriff Wells is at their front door. Sutton stands, bucket in hand, saying he'll handle it. The sheriff notes Sutton's success in retrieving his livestock. He asks for a private word and Sutton invites him inside. Sutton offers him some fresh milk, a gesture the sheriff politely declines. The sheriff gets right to the point, clearly upset with the outcome. Sutton feigns ignorance, asking what he could possibly mean. He explains the rumor. Whale and his associate were publicly humiliated. Sutton simply says they shouldn't have stolen his cows. Guess that's his idea of justice. The sheriff mentions a body at the bottom of the mountain, demanding a reason not to arrest him. Sutton plays the innocent farmer card, doubting the sheriff would arrest him. The sheriff takes the cup and drinks, seemingly dropping the issue for now. The sheriff agrees the recent deaths were likely the Wolf King's doing, but he warns Sutton that retaliation is coming, especially with the ongoing famine. He gives Sutton a final warning to show more restraint, while also thanking him for handling the criminals. He calls it an unofficial endorsement and heads off, putting in a future order for cheese. The sheriff takes his leave, but his parting words hang in the air. Sutton just gives a casual salute, completely unfazed by the conversation. As night settles over the quiet farm, Ellie asks about the visit, and Sutton explains the sheriff is now a regular customer. The idea of selling cheese in town sparks a bit of hope, and Sutton offers to build a cellar for storage. But as they begin the process, they run into a new problem: finding the right materials. Sutton mulls over their options, deciding stone is the best bet. He asks for a local source, and Ellie recalls an abandoned stone mine. She turns to leave, telling him she'll be right back. He asks where she's going, and she says to get a bigger tub. And just like that, he's off into the woods. Moving with a speed that defies belief, he scales the sheer mountain face with ease, dashing up the cliff without breaking his stride. He reaches the summit, admiring a view most people need ropes for, and finds the entrance to the mine, a massive chasm in the rock. He rappels down into the darkness of the mine. Landing with a burst of flame to light the way, he finds the perfect source of stone for their new cellar, and gathers his fiery energy ready to get to work. He slices through the massive boulder with a blade of pure heat, carving up the rock with effortless precision. He melts it all down into a more manageable form, only to realize he probably should have asked for measurements first. But his work is interrupted by a sudden, violent tremor. It seems his flashy entrance has woken something up. John warns the Ice Mage to stay back, his hands now crackling with fire. He stares at his palms, completely bewildered by this sudden power. The mage offers to mentor him, dismissing the man he just killed as a game character. He tells John that killing is just a chore in this world, and offers him a partnership. With no other choice, John reluctantly accepts the twisted deal. Their handshake seals the pact, a dark energy swirling around them. But the mage's glowing eye reveals his true, treacherous intent. And he's met with a sudden fiery rebuttal from John's hand. As the mage burns away, John levels up, trying to rationalize the kill. Back in the present, Sutton mulls over Ellie's vow, his thoughts cut short by a knock. Ellie's voice cuts through his thoughts, asking to open a window, but his mind is still trapped in the past, in the burning ruins of her home. He remembers seeing her there, a lone survivor amidst the chaos. Snapping back to the present, he quickly agrees to her request. He plays it off as a deep meditation to restore his mana. Sure, let's go with that. Ellie reminds him they need to pick up the plow in town. As they ride, he keeps his secret, asking about other locals in the valley. But Ben chimes in, mentioning the local Grimm and specters. Sutton's interest is immediately piqued by the local folklore, and the boy gives a terrifyingly detailed account of the monsters. Sutton's mind is clearly elsewhere as Garrett welcomes them to town. She proudly presents his brand new plow, along with the other supplies. But Sutton cuts her off, explaining they have other business to attend to, leaving Ben to wait outside the general store, looking thrilled about it. Inside, they gather groceries under the hateful glares of the locals. Ellie notes their terrified expressions, but Sutton clarifies the dynamic. She thanks him for his assistance, but warns him not to make a habit of it. On the way home, Sutton announces his plan to plant wheat. He's confident it will survive the winter because his book says so. Guess that settles it. Back at the farm, Ben proudly presents the bull, ready for duty. Sutton decides to name his new bovine companion Ferdy. As Ben runs off to help his sister, Sutton shares a moment with the bull. He recalls how he used mana to lure the cows down the mountain, and decides to try a similar trick, offering Ferdy a mana stone. The bull eagerly accepts the magical treat, With Ferdy now supercharged, Sutton prepares to plow the field. Ellie can only watch in shock as they take off like a rocket. The duo tears through the entire field in a matter of seconds. She rushes out completely bewildered by the commotion. Sutton proudly presents the finished product, a perfectly plowed field. But Ellie is quick to point out his handiwork is a little crooked. She sighs, figuring this is how she'll earn her keep around here. Sutton feigns offense, asking if his work was unsatisfactory. She confirms with a deadpan stare that it very much was. So she takes the lead, ready to show him how it's really done. As they work, she learns he's never even seen a bull plow before. With the fields finally done, their work moves to the barn. Sutton seems to be getting the hang of milking the cows, but he's a little too good, leaving them with an excess of milk. A problem made worse since no one in town will buy from a supposed witch. Ellie suggests they could make cheese or butter, but worries it'll spoil. She admits she never pictured him as the farming type. Sutton asks what kind of type he seems to be. The kind who would hate retirement and never wanted to be a soldier. He admits he didn't have a choice, finding this life harder than war. She asks why, and he explains that war was at least predictable. He was just alive, terrified of what the next day would bring. But now he gets to build things. A thought cut short by Ben's arrival. The boy shouts that Sheriff Wells is at their front door. Sutton stands bucket in hand, saying he'll handle it. The sheriff notes Sutton's success in retrieving his livestock. He asks for a private word and Sutton invites him inside. Sutton offers him some fresh milk, a gesture the sheriff politely declines. The sheriff gets right to the point, clearly upset with the outcome. Sutton feigns ignorance, asking what he could possibly mean. He explains the rumor. Whale and his associate were publicly humiliated. Sutton simply says they shouldn't have stolen his cows. Guess that's his idea of justice. The sheriff mentions a body at the bottom of the mountain, demanding a reason not to arrest him. Sutton plays the innocent farmer card, doubting the sheriff would arrest him. The sheriff takes the cup and drinks, seemingly dropping the issue for now. The sheriff agrees the recent deaths were likely the Wolf King's doing, but he warns Sutton that retaliation is coming, especially with the ongoing famine. He gives Sutton a final warning to show more restraint, while also thanking him for handling the criminals. He calls it an unofficial endorsement and heads off, putting in a future order for cheese. The sheriff takes his leave, but his parting words hang in the air. Sutton just gives a casual salute, completely unfazed by the conversation. As night settles over the quiet farm, Ellie asks about the visit, and Sutton explains the sheriff is now a regular customer. The idea of selling cheese in town sparks a bit of hope, and Sutton offers to build a cellar for storage. But as they begin the process, they run into a new problem: finding the right materials. Sutton mulls over their options, deciding stone is the best bet. He asks for a local source, and Ellie recalls an abandoned stone mine. She turns to leave, telling him she'll be right back. He asks where she's going, and she says to get a bigger tub. And just like that, he's off into the woods. Moving with a speed that defies belief, he scales the sheer mountain face with ease, dashing up the cliff without breaking his stride. He reaches the summit, admiring a view most people need ropes for, and finds the entrance to the mine, a massive chasm in the rock. He rappels down into the darkness of the mine. Landing with a burst of flame to light the way, he finds the perfect source of stone for their new cellar, and gathers his fiery energy ready to get to work. He slices through the massive boulder with a blade of pure heat, carving up the rock with effortless precision. He melts it all down into a more manageable form, only to realize he probably should have asked for measurements first. But his work is interrupted by a sudden, violent tremor. It seems his flashy entrance has woken something up. A pair of massive stone giants emerge from the darkness. He recalls Ben's warning about the local Grimm. He tries to reason with them, asking if they can talk. He offers a peaceful gesture, a small flame in his palm. He insists that a fight isn't necessary. The Grimm's response is a silent, gaping roar. It raises a massive fist and Sutton sighs, resigned to violence. Oh, the horror. Wreathed in flames, he easily dodges the attack. With no one around to see, he can finally cut loose, and delivers a fiery punch right to the Grimm's face. A beam of pure fire pierces the Grimm's stone hide. He admits he's missed this and plans to make it quick. The Grimm stumbles back, its partner moving to assist. It lets out a furious roar, ready for another round. But Sutton is already gathering his energy, unleashing a massive fireball in their direction. The blast cuts clean through the second Grimm's body, aiming for the glowing crystal at its very core, and the stone giant shatters in a fiery explosion. Sutton watches the dust settle, completely unfazed. The remaining Grimm hurls a volley of rocks in his direction, but Sutton dodges with ease, a fireball already in hand. He stands between them, completely unfazed by their numbers. He finds their attempt to surround him rather adorable, and unleashes a massive fireball of his own. But his mind flashes back to Ellie, a lone survivor in the ruins. The blast connects, engulfing the Grimm in a fiery explosion. He considers ending it, but realizes they're just defending their home. The Grimm's crystal core seems to absorb the flames. He asks if they liked his fireballs since they're now holding them. He recalls Ben's fear, a thoughtful look on his face. With a snap of his fingers, he puts a new plan into motion. A small spark ignites in the darkness, a simple command. The Grimm suddenly stop their attack, confused by the change. Sutton gives a confident nod, ready to try a different approach. The Grimm now hold the fireballs, mesmerized by the warmth. He muses that teaching them about fire was the easy part. He offers them more mana, a deal for their cooperation. And just like that, he's got himself a new construction crew. Their first project, a brand new, very sturdy-looking chest. Sutton asks his new crew what they've got in the chest. The Grimm seem to be offering it to him, a flame glowing in its chest. He realizes they want to trade, the chest for his mana. With a snap of his fingers, he materializes his payment. He offers them 2 mana stones in exchange for the box. The Grimm accepts the deal, taking the stones in its massive hand. And in return, it presents him with the mysterious chest. Sutton opens it, curious to see what's inside. He finds a single, magically grafted flower, a discovery that raises a lot of questions about this mountain's history. He wonders if other mages left this behind, but dismisses the thought. He thanks his new construction crew for their help, and leaves them a generous tip, which of course brings the apocalypse one step closer. Back at the farm, a new day begins. Ellie steps outside to find Sutton asleep in a giant stone tub. She wakes him, and he groggily greets the morning. She asks if he was out all night getting this massive pot, and points out he never bothered to measure if it would even fit inside. She can only sigh, wondering what she's going to do with him. She offers him a blanket, but he claims he just overworked himself. She teases him about his habit of overworking, inviting him inside. Sutton takes a moment to appreciate this new life. A simple, peaceful meal with his new family, but he feels he doesn't deserve any of it after his past. He knows the power inside him could destroy this all in a heartbeat. His dark thoughts twist the scene into a horrifying vision. He wonders if his magic is a curse fated to start another war, a vision that consumes even the innocent boy at the table. He snaps out of it, claiming he has something to do first, and plants the mysterious flower he found in the mine. He sits by the flower, a quiet moment of reflection. A small smile plays on his lips as he watches it. Ellie joins him, admiring the strange new bloom. Sutton muses on the fragile nature of life itself, but she counters that everything is fragile in its own way, and that even the strongest things need support to stand. A silent understanding passes between the two of them. She rests her head on his shoulder, a simple act of comfort, and as the flower glows, they share a moment of peace. Later, she asks how he got the tub ready to start making cheese. Sutton explains he wants to learn the craft properly. He knows he'll eventually have to leave them on their own. She reminds him that some things require patience, a skill he demonstrates by instantly lighting the fire. So much for patience. The sudden inferno leaves Ellie completely stunned. He immediately checks on her, worried by her reaction. But she brushes it off, ready to get back to work. She explains the slow, deliberate process of making cheese. He's impressed by her endless work ethic, a trait she learned from her grandmother. He asks about her grandmother, learning she died defending their home. She continues her lesson, explaining the slow process of separating the curds, a process that, she insists, cannot be rushed. Next, she shows him how to salt them, and finally how to place them in the press for 2 long days. Sutton gets a little too enthusiastic, as Ellie explains it'll be months before it's ready. He finds it delicious, but the waiting reminds him too much of the battlefield. With their success comes a new problem: storage, which gets Sutton's mind turning. His simple cellar plan quickly escalates into a full-blown survival bunker, but their talk is cut short by a frantic shout. Ben runs up in a panic, convinced their bull is dying. The 3 of them rush across the yard to see what's happened to Ferdy. They find Ferdy lying weakly in the field, as Sutton tells the others he'll handle this. He tells Ellie to go practice the self-defense he taught her for their next trip to town. He assures them the bull will be fine, getting a friendly lick from Ferdy. As they walk away, Ben worries about the worst-case scenario. Alone with the bull, Sutton reveals the real problem and the solution. Ferdy's eyes light up, recognizing his favorite magical snack. The bull eagerly chomps down on his entire hand to get the treat. Sutton pulls his hand back in disgust as Ferdy crunches on the crystal. So much for a gentle bedside manner. He then offers the bull a new deal: more mana for better plowing, an offer that Ferdy accepts with supercharged enthusiasm. Sutton looks over the perfectly plowed field, quite pleased with the result. He tosses another mana stone to his supercharged companion. But the bull suddenly takes off at full speed, dashing through the woods with newfound energy. He finds one of the other cows, who seems equally confused. Ferdy lets out a snort and headbutts a nearby rock. He then begins digging at the ground with a strange intensity. Sutton catches up, curious about his bull's new landscaping hobby, but the other cow seems fiercely protective of the spot. And from the hole, a strange, glowing vine begins to emerge. Sutton stares at the strange plant, sensing a mana signature he's never seen before. He realizes Ferdy has been burying his mana crystals, scolding the plant for it. The plant recoils, and Sutton grimly notes that even nature can sense the monster he is. He figures this must be what the bull's been eating, hoping there are no side effects. He gives Ferdy one last mana stone as a reward for a hard day's work. With his chores done, Sutton heads back to the farmhouse at sunset. He calls out for Ellie, only to find her and Ben standing silently in the dark, blindfolded. He starts to tell them about the bull, but stops short, sensing something is wrong. Suddenly, Ellie lunges forward, striking him in the neck with a sharp object. And with surprising strength, she flips him clean over her shoulder. Well, the training seems to be working. Sutton hits the floor, with Ben landing right on top of him. The boy then proceeds to beat him with a broom. They explain this was just a pop quiz on his own self-defense lessons. Sutton catches his breath, as Ellie tells him he'll need to be faster than that. She admits she wanted to test her skills against a former royal knight. Later that night, a quiet darkness settles over Fairford. But two men stumble out of the saloon, celebrating a job well done. One of them walks off alone, taking a swig from his bottle, unaware that he's being followed by a shadowy figure. A match flares in the darkness as a familiar voice greets the stranger. The man turns, nervously asking who's lurking in the shadows. The shadowy figure explains he's just here for a quick hello, but the man smirks, blocking the incoming strike with his sword. He boasts about almost being a royal knight. Almost doesn't count, buddy. The shadowy figure just smiles, explaining that no amount of preparation can protect him from this. The fight is over in an instant, unseen by the sleeping town, leaving another body to be found in the morning. A few days later, the townsfolk gather for the funeral of Mr. Tanner. Back at the farm, Sutton gets to work on their new cellar. He digs tirelessly, carving a massive pit into the earth. Ellie and Ben can only watch as the hole grows larger. He finally declares it deep enough, as Ellie offers him a drink. She suggests he might want to take a break from the hard labor, but Sutton jokes that this is no time to be retired. Ben runs up, eager to help with the construction. Sutton playfully warns him to avoid any more window-related incidents. He gives the boy a hammer and a new task to focus on. With the digging complete, he announces their need for some very large rocks. He notes the lack of suitable rocks in the immediate area, so he decides to take Ferdy on a little field trip. Back at the farm, Ellie reassures the other cows. While Ben gets to work on his own construction project, Sutton and his supercharged bull race across the plains. They soon arrive at a much more promising location. Meanwhile, Ellie can only wonder what he's up to, and Ben contemplates the best way to assemble the wood. Sutton, of course, opts for his usual subtle approach. He asks his bull if he's never seen this before. He returns with a cart full of rocks for their new cellar, but Ferdy seems to be complaining about the heavy load. Sutton sarcastically asks if it's too heavy, while carrying a boulder himself. He offers the bull another mana stone as motivation. Telling him not to get used to it, Sutton leads the way back. They arrive to find Ben trying his hand at construction. Sutton drops his massive rock with a ground-shaking thud. The sudden noise catches Ellie completely by surprise, and causes Ben to miss his nail, hitting his thumb instead. The adults rush over to check on the crying boy. The boy wonders if milk is the key to Sutton's power. Ellie decides it's time to call it a day, but Sutton vows to finish the cellar by morning. And so, a quiet night settles over the farmhouse, as Sutton works tirelessly, laying the foundation for their new cellar. He uses his fiery magic to fuse the stones, ready to get the job done. The next morning, a lone rider approaches the property. From a rooftop vantage point, we see it's Sheriff George. But as he raises a hand to knock, a voice tells him to halt. Sutton appears, telling him to let the others rest after a long day. But the sheriff isn't here for pleasantries, demanding to know what Sutton knows. The sheriff accuses Sutton of playing dumb about the situation. He tells him to drop the act, confirming there's a problem. A very big one, judging by his grim expression. Sutton grows tired of the silent treatment and asks him to get on with it. The sheriff seems to realize that Sutton is genuinely clueless. His tone shifts to a grave warning. He and Ellie need to run. He reveals there's been another murder, the zealot who attacked Ellie. Sutton is completely unmoved, saying he won't be missed. Guess he's not sending flowers. The sheriff explains that the town now blames them for the death. Sutton wonders why this is so different, since Ellie has been a suspect for years. The sheriff explains the man was beloved, but had his own dark secrets. But Sutton is done running, telling the sheriff he's staying put. George simply warns him to watch his back and rides off. Sutton can only wonder if a normal day is too much to ask for. Back at the farmhouse, the morning sun rises. The conversation has woken Ellie, who wonders who was outside. Sutton walks back to the house, his mind heavy with the news. He calls for Ellie, who is shocked to see he's been up all night. She asks if everything is all right, but he can only say it's complicated. He leads her outside to show her the finished cellar. He explains the town now thinks they killed the zealot, but he tries to reassure her with his unique solution. The cellar is a fully equipped bomb shelter with an escape tunnel. He clarifies this was all built before the sheriff's warning. She has to admit it's a nice shelter for the apocalypse. He tells her he never wants her to suffer like that again, promising that the eternal flame can't reach her here, a promise that seems to bring her a moment of peace. She then reveals she has a gift for him as well. A cow-print sleeping cap, perfect for any retired farmer. Sutton holds up the cap, asking if this is her hint to get some sleep. She just smiles as he accepts the gift, calling it perfect. And it seems he's taken her advice to heart, enjoying a peaceful nap with his bovine companion. Retirement looks good on him, but later he finds the magical flower he planted has vanished. He suspects the Grimm are involved, but Ellie's voice cuts through his thoughts. She sees him leaving, noting he seems to be in a hurry. He turns down her offer of dinner, saying he has an important errand, a response that clearly wounds her feelings. He promises to return by morning, and she reluctantly accepts his word. Sutton races back through the woods, leaping through the trees with impossible speed and landing with fiery grace, before descending back into the familiar mine. He lands to find a strange new addition to the cave. His missing flower has been replanted here, and the Grimm have built a statue in his honor. He has to admit their craftsmanship is impressive, but his attention is drawn to another stone chest. He inspects the lock, sensing it's already been tampered with. With a burst of fiery energy, he shatters the lock. Inside, he finds a set of old mage robes and a mysterious book. A mage's grimoire, a relic from a time when people would kill for such power. He knows that opening these things usually ends in a fiery explosion. He hopes it might finally contain the instructions for this strange new life, but he hesitates, knowing it could contain a world-ending spell. He decides against it, believing no one should wield that kind of power. After all, the war was fought to rid the world of magic's destruction. Still, he's impressed by the Grimm's intelligence, drawing a symbol on the stone. He hopes this strange flower is the key to creating a new kind of crop. Sutton decides it's time to gather the materials for their cellar, and so he makes another trip back into town. His presence immediately puts the locals on edge. He can feel their eyes on him, wondering what he's doing back. He arrives at what looks like a mining supply store, but he's met with a rather hostile welcome. Sutton just sighs, explaining he's here to do some shopping. He warns the kid that threatening him is a terrible life choice. Just then, Garrett appears, scolding her employee for his poor customer service. She takes the list with a smile, sending the terrified kid away. Garrett agrees to help with the finishing touches for his cellar. Sutton asks about her apprentice, who seems a bit on edge. She warns him that the murdered man was a friend of the Wolf King. As he leaves, the apprentice asks if the rumors are true. He wonders if Sutton is a killer, just like the others. But Garrett quickly shuts him down, defending Sutton's character. The scene cuts away to a woman wondering if John ever came home, and we see a younger John, plagued by nightmares. His mother knocks on the door, asking if he's awake. He snaps back to the present, feigning meditation as Ellie enters. Sutton wakes up to the smell of pancakes. Ellie confirms that breakfast is fresh and hot. At the table, she asks what was so important he missed dinner. He shows them the magical flower, explaining his suspicions about it, which promptly erupts in a display of blue, fiery magic. Ben suggests planting it in the cellar, away from the sunlight. But their breakfast is cut short by a sudden knock at the door. Sutton goes to answer, finding a large shadow waiting for him. Outside stands a group of men, flanked by two massive wolves. He confirms his identity, asking if he's speaking to the Wolf King. The Wolf King smirks, sarcastically confirming his identity. He commends Sutton for his calm demeanor, his pets growling at his side. One of the wolves gets uncomfortably close, its teeth bared. Sutton cuts right to the chase, demanding to know his purpose. The Wolf King implies the reason is obvious, a threat in his eyes. He's here for revenge, and he's not being subtle about it. Sutton stands his ground, with Ellie and Ben watching from behind. The Wolf King compliments the farm, his pack spreading out across the yard. Sutton asks him to clarify his veiled threat. He notes how quickly Sutton fixed a place that was previously undefended. Sutton feigns ignorance, playing dumb. The Wolf King accuses him of murder and theft, but Sutton corrects him on one key detail. He spits on the ground, a clear sign of disrespect. The Wolf King claims ownership of everything from his den, including the cows. He then implies that Ellie and Ben are his property too. Sutton's eyes narrow, his patience clearly at its end. He shoves the Wolf King back, a clear warning. The bandit leader just laughs, calling it a brave move as his pets get riled up. But before Sutton can act, Ellie calls out his name. She steps between them, demanding they be left in peace. The Wolf King tosses a treat to one of his pets, mocking Ellie and Sutton as murderers who aren't so tough. He finds it amusing they killed the zealot, calling him weak. But he quickly turns on his own men for laughing, reminding them of their own recent humiliating defeat. Ellie shoves him back, telling him to show some respect. He holds up a hand, stopping his men from retaliating. He then gives her 3 days to return his cows and get out of town. But Sutton steps forward, asking what happens if they don't. The Wolf King just smiles and snaps his fingers. He warns that his wolves are hungry after their long trip, but Sutton just smirks, figuring he'd be a tough meal. The Wolf King admits he has guts, but reiterates his 3-day deadline. He lets out a condescending, arrogant laugh, and with a final command to his men, he takes his leave. Ellie asks what got into him, but Sutton is just fed up with bullies. He decides he'll have to stick around until the bandits are dealt with. Later, the three of them sit in a tense silence. Ellie breaks it, reminding him of the Wolf King's ultimatum. She asks if he'll give up the cows, but Sutton has a different philosophy. Sutton explains his philosophy on fear, concluding that the Wolf King's threats are meaningless to him. A quiet understanding settles between him and Ellie, and as a new day dawns over the farm, Sutton gets back to the simple work of tending his fields. But his peace is interrupted by an unexpected visitor, Jonas, who has brought a couple of new faces to the farm. He introduces Gottfried, the local caravan merchant, a man with a smile that's just a little too wide. But the other man seems to recognize Sutton from somewhere and blurts out his full name, nearly revealing a secret Sutton would rather keep buried. The merchant Gottfried is immediately taken with Ellie. Sutton asks her to show Jonas their new cheese, much to her reluctance. He gives her a pleading look, reminding her of their hard work. She reluctantly agrees, telling him he owes her big time. As they walk away, Sutton turns his attention to the merchant, and his friendly farmer facade drops in an instant. The merchant immediately falls to his knees, begging for forgiveness. He prostrates himself, hailing the eternal flame. Well, so much for keeping a low profile. Sutton's power flares to life, confirming the man's worst fears. He gets right down to business, demanding to know who sent him. The merchant pleads for mercy, revealing Sutton once saved his life. He recounts a battle where Sutton's identity was briefly exposed. Sutton orders him to keep his identity a secret or face the consequences. He asks a chilling question. Why is the merchant still breathing? He explains he needs a local contact and the merchant has just been volunteered. The merchant, however, seems to think this is a holy mission. Guess he's a fan. Defeated, Sutton just agrees to call it a holy mission. The merchant celebrates a little too loudly for a secret mission. And of course, Ellie overhears the one thing she wasn't supposed to. The two men try to play it off with some very unconvincing laughter. The merchant tries to cover, calling Sutton a hero who will cleanse the world. But Ellie cuts him off, reminding him that his hero is a mass murderer. As they debate the job description of a god, Sutton tries to change the subject. She reminds them of the cost of that war, revealing she lost her family. And just like that, the tension is broken by Jonas and a plate of cheese. He takes a bite himself, declaring it to be delicious. Sutton then gives the merchant a rather forceful suggestion to try some. The terrified merchant quickly obliges, taking a piece from the plate. Jonas asks for his opinion, completely oblivious to the silent threat. And the merchant bursts into praise, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. The merchant continues his over-the-top praise for the cheese. Sutton cuts him off, giving Ellie all the credit for her craft. Gottfried is blown away by the mere concept of cheddar. Sutton dismisses his act and excuses himself to get a list, but not before giving Jonas a firm, silent warning to behave. As Sutton walks away, Gottfried immediately starts talking business. Ellie confirms they plan to sell their cheese in about a month. The merchant eagerly offers to buy her entire stock himself. He explains his passion, calling himself a cheese connoisseur. He believes her harder cheese has incredible potential for the market. He sees a golden opportunity to market the cheese as an exclusive product. But Sutton cuts the sales pitch short, handing him a new shopping list. The merchant eagerly accepts, promising to retrieve the items immediately. Ellie can only watch his fawning with pure disgust. Jonas uses the moment to pull her aside for a private conversation. She asks why he waited, but he claims he was just too captivated by the cheese. He confirms her worst fears. There's been another murder in town. The victim, he reveals, was the very shopkeeper who harassed her, and now the entire town is pointing the finger directly at her. He offers his support, claiming to be on her side. Jonas leans in, planting a seed of doubt about Sutton. Ellie immediately refutes the claim, but Jonas mocks her conviction. He offers his protection, his intentions anything but noble. But she slaps his hand away, demanding he leave immediately. Jonas backs off, feigning compliance with her wishes. But he turns back, vowing to hunt down the real witch. He promises a public execution with no mercy. Apparently he is running for mayor. A final, chilling threat hangs in the air, aimed directly at her. Outside, the merchant asks Sutton about Ellie's situation. Sutton turns, his expression hardening as he asks for clarification. The merchant points out Ellie's obvious hatred for the eternal flame. Sutton asks if he can really blame her. After what Sutton himself did in the war, he grabs the man by the collar, telling him to be quiet. Gottfried panics, promising to do better as Sutton's power flares. But Sutton dismisses his words as empty promises. He asks if the merchant knows what it's like to lose everything. To be nothing but a fire that consumes all it touches. The terrified man insists he's just a simple salesman. Sutton lets him go, telling him to stick to what he knows. Jonas calls out to Sutton, ready to wrap up their visit. He notices Ellie's troubled expression, asking what they were talking about. She quickly dismisses his concern, claiming they were just discussing business, and that she's decided to take charge of the cheese distribution herself. She looks Gottfried in the eye, telling him they'll be doing things her way. She rejects his business model, laying down the law with newfound confidence. Both Jonas and the merchant are left speechless by her sudden declaration. Gottfried whispers to Jonas that he understands the attraction, calling her fiery. He then shakes her hand, agreeing to her terms and calling her Mrs. Sutton, a title that leaves both her and Sutton flustered and trying to explain. The merchant waves a cheerful, if slightly forced, goodbye. As Sutton quietly considers murder, Ellie asks what he's mumbling. He quickly plays it off, a blush creeping onto his face. He was just admiring the beautiful sunset, of course. Later that evening, Ellie is alone with her thoughts in the kitchen. The merchant's words echo in her mind, Mrs. Sutton. But she knows she can't trust him if he's still loyal to the eternal flame. The next morning, Sutton greets her, and she asks about his work. He confirms all 25 acres are planted, asking about their expected yield. She playfully suggests he consult his trusty farming manual for the answer. He reads from the book, giving her an estimate on their yield. But he stops, noticing something on her cheek. He gently wipes it away, despite her flustered protests. And for a moment, the air between them is electric. He quickly hides behind his book, regretting the move while he's still keeping secrets. He changes the subject, asking about the basics of measurement. She explains the concept of a bushel, a lesson not found in his book. He takes a bite of a cookie, enjoying the simple moment. But their peace is shattered as Ben bursts in with urgent news. News that is immediately forgotten when he spots the forbidden cookies. The two adults quickly try to finish off the evidence. They both deny the existence of any more cookies, a denial that Ben is not taking very well. He points out the last remaining cookie on the table, but Ellie is faster, snatching it up in a flash. She gives it to Sutton, claiming he earned it for his hard work. Ben protests, arguing that his chores are just as important. Sutton smoothly changes the subject, asking about those wolf tracks. But Ben holds his ground, linking the information to the cookies. So Sutton raises the stakes, offering candy in exchange. A true master of negotiation. The boy eagerly spills the details, a bag of candy held high. Sutton tells him to get cleaned up so he can show him the tracks. As Ben runs off, Sutton turns to Ellie with a more serious topic. He suggests they investigate the murders to clear their names. Ellie agrees, ready to compile a list of suspects and motives. With a plan in place, Sutton prepares to check the wolf tracks. Out in the woods, Ben explains the tracks are less than a day old. But he has a much more pressing question on his mind. He awkwardly asks if Sutton and his sister are an item. You damn romantic. A question that leaves Sutton completely speechless. Sutton is left speechless, but Ben quickly changes the subject, pointing out a deadfall trap he made. Sutton is impressed by the craftsmanship, learning Ellie taught him the basics. He offers to show the boy a few improvements after they check the tracks. The two of them head deeper into the quiet, misty woods. As they walk, Sutton asks if the boy is afraid of the zealot. Ben tries to play it cool, but his nervous sweat gives him away. Suddenly, the snap of a twig echoes through the silence. The boy immediately panics, hiding behind Sutton's legs. Sutton calmly points out that the wolf was just a stick. So much for not being scared. Ben quickly tries to recover, pretending he knew that all along. The boy insists he was just keeping Sutton on his toes. He then points out the very wolf tracks they came to find. Sutton rewards his keen eye with another bag of candy. He inspects the prints, confirming 4 of the Wolf King's pets passed through. Ben excitedly asks if they can build a giant trap to stop him. but Sutton gently explains their target is probably too smart for that. Their eyes drift toward the distant, misty mountain peak. Sutton explains that an old hunter's lessons on traps saved his life during the war, and so they get to work setting up a massive deadfall of their own. He can't help but marvel at how peaceful this valley is compared to the rest of the world. But their peaceful moment is shattered by a distant howl. Sutton smirks, realizing this life isn't so different from his last. He draws a familiar blade from its sheath, telling Ben to head home. He has some wolves to hunt. Later, he announces the Wolf King's 3 days are up. And from a bag, he pulls out a small armory. Guess retirement didn't come with a pension plan. Ben and Ellie can only stare, wondering where he hid all this. The boy asks to hold the sword, and Sutton obliges. He struggles with the weight as Sutton explains its origin. Sutton then polishes a dagger, noting its practical advantages. He asks what's better than one dagger, and Ben has the right idea. Sutton tells them to stay inside, checking if Ellie is ready to use her blade. Ben complains about not getting one, but Sutton reminds him of his destructive tendencies with a hammer. He tells them to lock up, promising a swift return. He looks up at the full moon, finding the atmosphere just right for a hunt. A rustle in the trees sends a flock of birds scattering into the night, and from the shadows, the Wolf King and his crew emerge. One of his companions, Rosalie, questions if this is all really necessary for one farmer. The Wolf King snaps back, reminding her that Sutton is a class holder. But she just laughs, mocking him for being afraid of a single night. The Wolf King reminds her that looks can be deceiving. But his men just bicker about who's stronger. Rosalie quickly diffuses the tension with a bit of charm. From the trees, Sutton listens as the Wolf King recounts his supposed deeds. He realizes the man genuinely believes he's the town's killer, and decides it's time to find a more suitable battleground. He wishes he could just burn it all down, but that would blow his cover. Suddenly, one of the wolves lets out a furious bark. The Wolf King dismisses it as a squirrel, clearly a master of deduction. Rosalie grows impatient and dashes ahead to scout, ignoring his warnings. The Wolf King grits his teeth, clearly annoyed with her attitude. His companion worries she'll be outmatched, but the Wolf King seems fine with that outcome. Meanwhile, Sutton walks alone through a clearing in the woods. He stops, sensing the mana signature of another class holder. He turns, sword in hand, ready for a fight. A voice calls down to him from the branches of a tall tree. Rosalie introduces herself, happy to have finally found him. Sutton asks if she's with the Wolf King's crew. She tries to intimidate him with a story about another John she once met, and leaps down to attack, not even getting his name right. She dismisses his name, lunging forward with her blade. But Sutton is just as fast, parrying the strike with ease. A small cut appears on his cheek, but he seems to enjoy the challenge. She lands gracefully, impressed that he could keep up with her. She taunts him, asking if he's too scared to show his own skills. Sutton calmly replies that it won't be necessary. She insists, calling it rude not to return the favor. Lowell, bandits with good manners, that's ridiculous. He tightens his grip, finally agreeing to her request. She explains the Wolf King wanted him alive, but she's not one to share. Sutton thinks it's a waste for her to die over someone else's cows. He brings his blade down in a powerful arc. Their swords meet with a resounding clang. Rosalie just grins, her eyes wild with excitement. Sutton swings again, but she vanishes in a blur. He scans the woods, trying to track her movement. But a volley of daggers suddenly flies his way. He's surrounded by multiple copies of her, leaping through the trees. As the clones attack from above, the real one charges forward. Sutton unleashes a fiery arc with his own blade, effortlessly deflecting every single projectile. He turns to face her, his blade ready for the fight. She appears behind him, inviting him to a deadly dance. Sutton swings his sword, warning her that's a good way to lose a hand. The blade slams into the dirt, and he admits he might be getting rusty, but not rusty enough to miss the daggers flying his way. He flips into the air, dodging her clones with acrobatic grace. Balancing on his sword, he's completely surrounded by her illusions. Guess this is what passes for a warm welcome around here. He realizes she's a high-level rogue, too fast to track by sight alone, so he closes his eyes, focusing on her mana signature instead, a move that seems to deeply offend her sense of showmanship. He pinpoints the real Rosalie among the fakes, and with a single sweeping arc of his blade, he finds his opening but hesitates for a moment. He opts for a non-lethal strike, disarming her instantly. After all, he can't give Sheriff George another body to investigate. His attention shifts as the rest of the bandits finally arrive. He tells Rosalie she wasn't quite fast enough to finish the job. The Wolf King greets him with a predatory grin. He sarcastically welcomes Sutton, asking where his cows are, and then makes the mistake of asking where his Ellie is. Sutton holds the injured Rosalie, telling the Wolf King his priorities are misplaced. But the bandit leader dismisses her as just another one of his pets. She tries to warn him of Sutton's true strength, but he silences her. He promises she'll be punished for her failure. The Wolf King's eyes glow as he asks about his title. He unleashes a powerful attack, his wolves circling their prey. Sutton just tips his hat, completely unimpressed by the display. He taps his dagger against his chest, unleashing a fiery power he'd kept hidden. Rosalie can only stare, realizing he was holding back the entire time. The bandits recognize his dagger as a rare Magitech shield. Sutton asks if they're interested in his little toy. The Wolf King vows to take it from him and orders the attack. The wolves charge forward, their red eyes glowing in the dark. He says he hates to kick a dog, but makes a very convincing exception. Another wolf lunges at him from behind, jaws wide, and gets a fiery punch right to the face for its trouble. From the sidelines, Rosalie clutches her side, still feeling the burn. But the Wolf King grabs her, asking where she thinks she's going. He orders her to attack, his voice filled with menace. But Sutton is already moving, dodging a volley of daggers. He takes an arrow to the back but still lands a solid blow. The bandit notes that his broken ribs don't seem to slow him down. The Wolf King calls him a coward for hiding behind his pets. Guess irony is lost on the guy using a human shield. Sutton just replies that two heads are better than one. He leaps forward, telling the bandit his fight is with him. And Rosalie is tossed aside, her part in this fight now over. The two men clash, the bandit taunting Sutton's strength. He unleashes a powerful skill, vowing to do much better. Rosalie calls out to her boss, ready to strike from behind. But Sutton is already in motion, deflecting a volley of projectiles. He asks Rosalie if this is how she repays him for her broken ribs. She retorts that it's also for saving her life. As the other bandit attacks, Sutton kicks her clear of the blast. He grabs her, reminding her that he's saved her twice now. The Wolf King roars, vowing that Sutton won't escape. He and his pack charge forward with feral intensity. Sutton calmly notes that he doesn't have to act like his pets. The Wolf King bites down on his arm, only to get a mouthful of fire. And with a fiery swing, Sutton sends the bandit leader flying. He lands hard, getting a simple lesson in basic manners. From the sidelines, the other bandits watch in disbelief. Rosalie realizes Sutton is just as unhinged as their boss. She tries to convince her companion to retreat, but he refuses to abandon his leader. The Wolf King gets back up, unleashing a powerful energy blast, an attack that Sutton deflects with a casual flick of his wrist. The bandit leader looms over him, his weapon crackling with power. But Sutton shatters it with a fiery strike, unimpressed by the party trick. And with a final powerful kick, he tells the Wolf King to sit. The Wolf King skids to a stop, landing hard on the ground. Sutton stands over him, commending his obedience. He drops the man's weapon, telling him to go fetch. The bandit leader seethes, his pride completely shattered. But he gets to his feet, laughing with a newfound respect. He unleashes his true power, a dark aura flaring around him. His wolf's eyes glow with the same malevolent energy. Sutton realizes he's transferring mana, a high-level tamer skill. The Wolf King gives the command, and his pack lunges forward. Sutton meets the charge, his fiery blade a blur of motion. One of the wolves sinks its teeth deep into Sutton's leg, while another latches onto his arm with a vicious bite. He's completely surrounded by the feral, supercharged pack. He calmly reminds them of the no-biting rule. The Wolf King explains his little trap. The wolves are now living bombs. Sutton seems to find this new development interesting. The bandit leader reveals he's overloaded them with mana, a cruel and desperate tactic. He gives Sutton a choice. Let them chew through his bones or face the explosion. A lose-lose situation, and the Wolf King is enjoying every second of it. But Sutton just calls the entire strategy ridiculous. He knows he could end this in an instant, but revealing his true power would blow his cover. The Wolf King just laughs, finding the situation hilarious. He'd love to watch Sutton get torn apart, but he has some unfinished business to attend to. He calls out to his companion, a man named Jamal. He gives the order to clean up the mess when it's over. And with that, the Wolf King takes his leave. The big man admits even he's scared of his boss's methods, but he promises to make Sutton's end a quick one. With witnesses present, Sutton decides to drain the wolf's mana. He grabs the nearest wolf, his hand glowing with fiery power. The beast recoils as its energy is siphoned away, and it's tossed aside, completely drained and defeated. Jamal stares in disbelief, realizing this is no ordinary farmer. Sutton calmly dispatches the rest of the pack, confirming he's a mage. Well, so much for the quiet retirement plan. He turns to Jamal, explaining that his little secret can't get out. But the big man stands his ground, no longer afraid of monsters. He powers up, ready to go down fighting a legendary killer. And with a final war cry, he swings his massive axe. Sutton parries the heavy blow with his own blade. Jamal taunts him, calling Ellie a witch for siding with a monster. But Sutton catches his fist mid-swing and delivers a swift kick to the back of his leg. The big man stumbles, brought down to his knees. Sutton gives him a simple warning: leave Ellie out of this. He tells the man to stand up and face him properly. Guess he prefers a fair fight, even with bandits. But Jamal's eyes burn with a renewed determination. He tightens his grip on his weapon, ready to bring it down with all his might. But Sutton easily blocks the massive swing with his own blade. Jamal insists that even as a bandit, he has a moral high ground. But his words are cut short as Sutton's fiery hand melts his axe. The metal sizzles and drips away into nothing, a realization that probably should have dawned on him a lot sooner. Sutton asks if he's finally done with his little speech, and with a single fiery slice, the fight is over. The big man hits the ground, his final stand coming to an end. Sutton turns away, declaring their business concluded. But he realizes the Wolf King has vanished during the chaos. A sudden horrifying thought crosses Sutton's mind. The farm. If the Wolf King dares to touch Ellie and Ben, he'll leave nothing but ashes in his wake. And the system seems to approve, bringing the apocalypse one step closer. He launches himself through the forest canopy, moving with a speed that defies belief. He skids to a halt on a nearby ridge,